Hello everyone, back tuning in to today's first video. We're going to have a look at the ECMWF 30-day ensembles at the Hungarian Met Office website for today's first video. So it's going to take us well into December, and we're going to see how the temperature and precipitation anomalies are shaping up for the UK and for Europe in the month ahead. Coming up this afternoon, our second video for today, we'll have a detailed look at the weather for the next week to 10 days. Colder weather is on the way for next week, and we'll bring you up to date with all of the latest developments in terms of these colder temperatures, colder conditions for today's second video. It's going to be a really interesting one coming up this afternoon. But starting us off will be our 30-day look ahead with the ECMWF at the Hungarian Met. A big thank you to the Hungarian Met for supplying these charts. We can't show you mean sea level pressure or 500 millibar height anomalies. We can only show you temperature and precipitation anomalies, but you can get a rough idea of what the pattern will be doing to produce these temperature and precipitation anomalies. So without further ado, let's get on with your first video. We're going to start off with week 1. Week 46 for the year, but week 1 for our forecast period. Temperature anomalies for the UK and for Europe too. It's going to take us from the 12th through to the 18th of November. And we find we've got a very warm scene coming up, a very mild scene coming up for much of Europe. So over in the north, the far north and northeast of Europe, very mild temperature anomalies, widely between around 3 and 6 degrees. Some parts of northern Scandinavia up towards the Arctic Circle going up to around 6 to 10 degrees above average. Very mild week coming up. Much of UK and Ireland also forecast to have a milder than average week. Temperature anomalies somewhere between around 1 and 6 degrees above average. Many parts of Central Europe, from France in the west over towards Poland in the east, again forecast have a much milder than average week ahead, with again temperatures somewhere between around say 1 and 6 degrees above average. Down to Spain and Portugal, again milder than average or warmer than average temperature anomalies there between around 1 and 6 degrees above average. So for most central, northern and western parts of Europe, we are forecasting a much milder than average week ahead. You'll notice though in the far east and southeast it's colder than average. So from sort of western Russia down towards the Black Sea, and then further south in towards the Balkans, Greece and Turkey, these areas are having a colder than average week ahead. This is a sign of things to come. But at the moment for this coming week, those cold and average temperature anomalies are really penned in to the extreme east and southeast of Europe, with most places actually having a milder than average week. Precipitation anomalies for the coming week are looking like this. Generally a very dry scene across much of Europe. So UK and Ireland are being forecast to be drier than average. Most parts of France down towards Spain and Portugal, again drier than average there, except on this Mediterranean coast around the costas. It looks a little bit wetter than average there, but most parts of Spain and Portugal being forecast to have a drier than average week. Drier than average through the Mediterranean over towards Italy and over the Adriatic into the southeastern corner, also forecasting drier than average conditions there. In the extreme east and down towards the Black Sea area, it's a little bit wetter than average there. So where it's coldest, it's also a little bit wetter too. Going up to Scandinavia, again, many parts of Scandinavia, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and into the northeast of Europe around the Baltic, those areas again are being forecast to be drier than average. So really quite a dry week coming up, also very mild away from the extreme east and southeast. Now look what happens as we get through into week 2. This is the 19th to the 25th of November, and we go much colder across most parts of Europe. For northern Scandinavia, we're still forecast to be milder than average there. Up towards the Arctic Circle, again, we've got temperature anomalies between around 6 and 10 degrees above average. Iceland also forecast to be milder than average. So I think you can kind of see where the high pressure is sitting through this period. We're going to have high pressure up here, high pressure around here, where we've got these milder than average temperature anomalies. That's where we've got the high pressure. And then underneath we find that we're pulling in all of this cold air out of northern Europe and out of Russia. So most other parts of Europe are forecast to be colder than average, very widely from kind of like the Black Sea and down towards Greece and Turkey over here, all the way to the west of France, and many places in between. We're kind of like between 3 and 6 degrees below average. A pretty cold week coming up for the UK and Ireland, not as cold as it is for some parts of Europe, moderating effect of the North Sea, I suppose, in evidence there. But even so, it is a colder than average week for the UK and Ireland, with temperature anomalies between around 1 and 3 degrees below average. But the core of the cold seems to be through the central parts of Europe, and I suppose that's because we've got the high pressure again up here, and then we'll be bringing out those easterly winds rather like that. Down across the very far southwest through Spain and Portugal, a little bit milder than average through those areas. Through the Mediterranean, bit cooler than average through the central bowl of the Med. Italy, Corsica, Sardinia also forecast to be cooler than average. And then I say down into the Balkans and then further southeast, coming out quite a lot colder than average through those areas too. Precipitation wise, it remains a very dry scene across much of Europe in the second week, again the 19th, 25th of November. Much drier than average through many of these central areas from the UK and Ireland, in the west over towards the Russian border. Most places again being forecast to be on the drier than average side. Through the Med, it looks a little bit more unsettled. Spain and Portugal are forecast to be a bit wetter than average. Italy, quite interesting there. Western parts of Italy look fairly dry, but eastern parts of Italy on that Adriatic coast, again, forecasting to be a little bit wetter than average for those regions. Down towards, again, Greece and Turkey, it looks rather above average with precipitation there. But again, most parts of Europe, a very dry scene coming up there from the 19th to 25th of November, dry but cold. And then we're into week 3, which is the 26th of November through to the 2nd of December. Again, another much colder than average week coming up through most parts of Europe. The coldest anomalies to average are in the east and the southeast. So again, from this southwestern part of Russia, just here, down into the Balkans, and then around the Black Sea, down towards Greece and Turkey. Again, a lot colder than average there, 3 to 6 degrees below average. But many other parts of Europe are also forecast to be below average with their temperature anomalies this week. So these central parts of Europe, from France over to Poland, Germany in between, as well as Belgium, Holland, those areas again 1 to 3 degrees below average. In the UK, so Scotland and Ireland coming out close to average this week. England and Wales coming out with a colder than average week. Spain and Portugal close to average as well. Up across Scandinavia, it's still a little bit warmer than average there, but less so than it is in weeks 1 and 2. So the anomaly is still above average, but it isn't as above average as it was. That is the mildest place in Europe, though. Again, probably because they're sitting under the area of high pressure there, which then pushes out all of this cold air rather like that. Precipitation anomalies look like this. So still an ongoing scene for a lot of dry weather through many parts of Europe. The UK and Ireland are going closer to average with bare precipitation, but still hinting at being on the dry and average side. And then most other parts of Europe, particularly sort of central and northern Europe, forecast to be on the dry and average side. The anomaly isn't as significant as it is in weeks 1 and 2, and that's probably because the model is losing its signal to some degree. But again, it remains dry and cold, really, as we go into the final stages of November and the very start of December. Down in the Med, it looks a little bit more unsettled through much of the Med, actually. Spain and Portugal looking rather wetter than average there. The central basin of the Mediterranean looks rather wet, and even down into the south and southeast of the Med, it does look rather more unsettled through those regions. So possibly just hinting at a bit of a southerly tracking jet stream perhaps getting going through from the Atlantic through the Med, with the blocking highs all sitting in this sort of area. A little bit speculative, but it may be that he's hinting at a rather southerly tracking jet stream starting to move in from off the Atlantic. And then we go through to week 4. It takes us from the 3rd through to the 9th of December, so going well into the start of winter 2018-19. We find those colder than average temperature anomalies beginning to recede back into the very far east of Europe and around this southwestern Russian border. So the coldest temperature anomalies are sort of receding away to the east, still a little bit milder than average across Scandinavia, possibly hinting at being ever so slightly above average with temperature anomalies close to UK and Ireland as well. Otherwise, just lots of average temperature anomalies. It does look as though that early part of December might be starting to see a little bit of a recovery in the temperature. It might be only be temporary, but it does look as though some sort of slight recovery in temperatures is beginning to take place there from the 3rd through to the 9th of December. Alternatively, it might just be that model is losing its signal as it's going further out. But if that was the case, I wouldn't expect to see these cold average temperature anomalies here. It does look as though those cold temperatures are being pushed back, probably by a little bit of an Atlantic invasion, pushing back those colder than average temperature anomalies to the far east of Europe. A little bit speculative, but that's what it looks like to me. As far as precipitation is concerned, well, no real signal at this point. So obviously it looks like we've lost the drier than average signal that is covering most of Europe through this period, but neither are we into a wetter than average signal either. So just lots and lots of average, again probably because the model is losing its signal as it's going out to week 4. But if the jet stream was beginning to move back northwards and start to push into Europe, receding or causing those colder than average temperature anomalies to recede back to the far east, then you would expect it to be turning wetter, milder, but wetter would be what you'd expect to see through much of the north and the west of Europe in particular through that early part of December. But again, it's week 4, it's a very long way off, the signals are weak, so there's not really enough to go on to be able to say like what is happening through that early part of December. What we can say is that we're starting off very mild through much of Europe in the week ahead, but it's going to get a lot colder, so the second half of November, and we have been anticipating this ever since we did the November month-end forecast at the beginning of the month, but it looks like the second half of December will turn a lot colder, not just for the UK, but for much of Europe as well. Possibly just hints that after a cold opening to December, we possibly see the coldest of the air receding back to the east of Europe, as it perhaps turns a little bit milder and a little bit more unsettled through the opening part of December. But that is very, very speculative because the signals are really weak. Right, so that's your 30-day look ahead from the ECMWF 30-day ensembles for today. We'll be back later on with all of the latest on the cold weather that's on the way for next week. So come back for that this afternoon. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.